Listen up. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. You know, for fun. So lighten up and enjoy. Stomping Jen.
Sawtooth Frank.
So good to see you.
Like we haven't been seeing each other for the last...
We live together, but every moment I see you is a good moment to see you.
Thanks.
Do you know who our guest is? Who we're going to talk to?
No, tell me all about them.
We are going to talk to Stephen Bryla, who is owner of Go With The Float. It is a flotation therapy center located in Easthampton, Massachusetts. Do you know what floating is?
Yes.
What is it?
We're going to find out all about it when we talk to Stephen.
Yeah, and we did it.
We did do it.
And we're going to talk to Stephen about our experiences with this floating.
That's right.
Okay? This is going to be exciting stuff. Because I have to share my experiences with the world.
Oh, I'm sure the world can't wait.
I told Stephen when we came out of his float tanks that I had an experience and that I was going to share it with him. So let's get into it. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right, let's do it.
The Soft Serve Podcast.
Creamy, delicious ideas without the creepy truck. Stomping Jen, we're here, back with a guest again. We're going to promote the float on this episode. I have a lot to say.
Why'd you throw this paper at me?
I didn't want it. So you were the closest human target to me for throwing the paper at. Well, let's say hello to our guest, Mr. Stephen Bryla. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Sawtooth.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing floaty.
I love it.
I'm feeling floaty.
I love how much you embrace the concept of the float. When we came to visit you at the Flotation Center, I heard you talking about promoting the float. Promote the float. I love it. And that's what we're here to do. We're going to talk about floating and flotation therapy. So I wanted to ask you, just to tell our listeners who might not even know what the heck it is we're talking about, what is floating and flotation therapy?
All right, yeah. So floating is also known as, like sensory deprivation tanks. And so the float industry as a whole is, for whatever reason, shies away from that term because maybe when people hear sensory deprivation tanks, it's a bit, not so inviting. But to me, that's more of what it is because it's basically a big bathtub with less than a foot of water, 10 to 11 inches, that has 1,200 pounds of epsom salt. Well, ours do. Depends on what the water to salt ratio is. And we're trying to create an environment where you have as little sensory input from the environment as possible. So I'll kind of walk you through that. You'll come in to do your float, and you have a shower room within the float tank is in the shower room. So you have your own private room. And so you get in the float tank, and like I said, there's 10 to 11 inches of water, and you float in the nude. Now, there are some reasons for that, which I can get into later.
Yeah.
And so you lay on your back, and the water comes to about your, if you can envision laying on your back, and the backside is in the water while your front is in the air, and you're literally floating on the surface of the water. And now it's important that the water in the air is very close to your skin temperature, such that you can lose track of that boundary where the water in the air starts and stops. And so you can kind of lose track of your body at times. Sometimes people will say I had to wiggle my fingers and toes just to make sure they were still there. And, in theme of the sensory deprivation, it is completely pitch dark in there. When you get in, there's a light so you can see and get situated. And then you turn the light off and you're in the dark and it's quiet. You might hear your heartbeat or little sounds in the water if you move around a bit. But for the most part, it's pretty freaking quiet. And so that's it. And so you hang out in there. We do 60, 75 or 90-minute floats.
Oh my God.
There's no limit to how long one can float. I've floated for hours, fun fact, you actually don't get pruny in that water because of the salt content.
Yeah. And that's a great overview. And I'm going to walk you through my whole experience because people are going to want to know this.
Here we go. We didn't even talk about it. You're like, we're saving it for the podcast.
We're gonna walk through in excruciating detail from the minute I walk through the door. That's going to come a little bit later. Yeah. I like I said, I'm not trying to tease people. The things happened to me in that tank. Stomping John. I'm going to tell people about this.
Okay. Can I preface your experience?
Yes, please.
So listen, soft serve community. What do you call your soft servers? The ice cream eaters or something?
I don't know. We don't call them anything. But now maybe we should.
Yeah.
The ice cream eaters.
Yeah, we call them delightful, rational human beings who enjoy intelligent conversation. Is that catchy, Stomping Jen?
Right.
Is that catchy enough?
All right, delightful, rational human beings. I just want to preface before Sawtooth goes off on his experience that I'm always hesitant to share what my experiences are because John Lilly, who invented the tank, he had this whole thing where you don't want to program the people. So we're going to talk about our experiences, which is fine, but take them with a grain of salt. Okay. Yeah. And
no pun intended.
And, we want you to come in with an open mind because it's oh, this happened to me. And then people can kind of be expecting that. So just keep in mind that as we talk about our experiences with floating.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, Stephen, because I was reading your website and that's an important part of this, right? I am going to share my experience with my first float. But like you said, it is important that people understand that that's my experience, right? And that is only what happened to me, and it's not necessarily what is going to be for you. And you should come into it with your own as neutral a position as possible. Because I certainly came into it with a lot of expectations from listening to people who had done it before me, right? That I listened to. I'll just say Joe Rogan is somebody I listen to occasionally. His podcast, and he talks about his experiences with floating, right? What happened to me was very different. So anyways, again, and I'm glad I read Stephen's website and kind of said to myself, all right, I know I heard those experiences and I shouldn't let them influence what's going to happen to me. So anyways, kind of just try to have your own experience. I think that is a really important thing to stress, and we'll remind people as we go along. But Stephen, I wanted to ask you, how did you become aware of floating and flotation therapy and sensory deprivation? How did this become a thing you were interested enough in to open a business?
Yeah, so actually, you just mentioned Joe Rogan. I found out about floating from Joe Rogan, and this is actually before he even had his podcast, though. I just had my float anniversary, if you will. Last month was 14 years ago on my first float. And I was at UMass at the time. And my friend told me about it to go onto YouTube and type in Joe Rogan float tank. And so he so eloquently talked about it. I was immediately interested, searching around where to go get into one of these float tanks. And I stumbled upon a place from the internets out by Worcester. Shout out to the Crystalline Matrix, as far as I know, maybe the first one of the first places in the state to go grab a float. And they had a one room there. They had a samadhi tank, which was the first float tanks developed by John Lilly, who I mentioned earlier, the inventor of the float tank. And these ones were a lot smaller, not such as ours, like because our float tanks are what we call float cabins. They're very spacious, and you can even stand up inside of them. Yeah. These samadhi tanks are more of like the coffin type ones that people refer to, but I didn't care. I was like 20 years old. Like there was nothing gonna keep me from getting in that thing. And I actually had like a pretty profound experience on my first float. And so I was hooked. And it took me about a year to get back there. So I went back again. I realized immediately I wanted to, first three things I thought when they got me out was like, okay, I need to do that again. I need to do it longer, and I want to get stoned. Yeah. And so I did all three of those things in a year, right? Mm-hmm. I did a 90-minute float as opposed to the 60, and I'm like smoking up in the parking lot. And I remember driving home just thinking like, wow, how people need to know about this. Yeah. I can't believe no one knows about this thing. And it wasn't my immediate thought to open a float center. But years later, when I was looking for a career change, because the whole time what I had been thinking is I wish someone would do this in the valley so that I could float more. Yeah. And when no one was doing it, I was like, hey, maybe I should look into creating a space where people can come and float.
And your space is in an old, gigantic mill building in Easthampton, Massachusetts. How did you find that space, and how did you settle on that space? How did you know that was going to be home for Go With The Float?
Yep. So my original thought was Northampton. That's kind of the mecca for this type of like holistic healing stuff. So I was searching around. I was pretty dead set on Northampton actually too, because my parents played a big part in all of this. They supported me. At first they didn't, because, they were like, what the heck you want to do? And then, as they saw I was getting serious about it, they really helped me. My dad is a small business owner. He's done drywall for years, and they supported me, emotionally, financially, and they were kind of pointing to other places in the valley. And I was like, no, it's got to be Northampton. It's got to be Northampton. And I just couldn't figure out a spot there. And as y'all probably know, the rents there are crazy. Mm-hmm. And so my mom was suggesting Easthampton, and I looked around, and I found in these what they call the mill district here, because there's actually 3 old mill buildings in a row. Most people are familiar with the Eastworks building, which is right next door. That began like the gentrification process here about in the 90s. They started that. Yeah. And so I was like, wow, you know what? I could get a lot more square footage for a lot cheaper. And Northampton's just right down the road. So that's kind of how that all happened.
Yeah. Those buildings are amazing. Like, I have to say, like, I just like walking around in them, right? And to have something really cool, like a float center there, is pretty awesome too. So after you go float, or before, you can go like walk around the old mill buildings, because they're like amazing just to wander around in. I don't know. And there are lots of cool like art studios, and there's a cannabis dispensary there too. And like if you're into
that was part of the allure for me, to be honest. Yeah. I thought there'd be more crossover with with their customers, which we haven't quite seen, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a really cool space. So let's talk a little bit, Stomping Jen, about our experience. So we went on our anniversary.
Yes.
Right? When was that?
Was that the actual day?
It was, yeah. So
did we talk about that?
A little bit,
I
yeah.
think so, yeah.
Well, I feel honored that you spent your anniversary with us.
And part of it, Stephen, is I had heard so much and had been wanting to do floating for so long. Like, this was a meaningful thing for me to try to experience on our anniversary. I don't know. I thought it was really cool. Stomping Jen, I'm going to kind of walk through my experience, and I want you to chime in as I go along. Stephen, if you want to add, anything, feel free to, and I'll ask you some questions as we go along too. But so the first thing, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't really take note of the details of the space or really even investigate what the tanks look like prior to going. So you walk into the door, and the first thing I was struck by was the awesome interior, like the decorating. I think on your website, I looked it up, and you call it the parlor, right? Like kind of the waiting area. And it really has that feel of this like welcoming, warm, like really chill parlor like atmosphere. I loved it. I was like, wow, this is super cool. Like I was like instantly like at ease. I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting like walking into like
an Apple store, like
an Apple store, or like a sterile, like clinical type of environment. I don't know what I was expecting. And there's art everywhere and little statues and books and, you know, like a center with tea. And like, I was like, oh, okay, this is really cool. Like that was my first feeling. And then, so you get there, and ahead of time after you register, Go With The Float sends you, you know, kind of like okay, here's what to expect email, right? So you read through the email, and it tells you, you know, don't drink caffeine, like too close to your float, et cetera, et cetera. So I followed all of those directions, right? Go ahead.
I wasn't going to say
anything. You look like you were going to say something.
This is just very detailed.
Yeah. I want people to understand this, right? And so then we started talking to the float guide that we were talking that met us there that day. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name though.
Was it Brandon?
I think it was Brandon. Yeah, yeah. Super nice, and he walked us through all of the details.
The float concierge.
The float concierge, yeah.
The float facilitator.
The float facilitator.
Yeah, but he was awesome, right? Really nice, kind of told us, you know...
The lay of the land.
The lay of the land, where everything was in the space, right? What was there, and then he kind of walked us to our rooms, our float rooms. And like Steven said, there's a room per tank, kind of. Right? So we get in there, and I don't know what happened in your room, Stomping Jen, but I got in there, and I got naked.
Well, yeah, because you got a shower.
Yeah, well, I got naked.
I followed all the instructions.
Okay, I showered.
Shower, you rinse off.
Rinsed off. And
stick your earplugs in your ears.
Yep.
So you don't get salty ears.
Yeah, I used the earplugs. So I put those earplugs in, and now Brandon, the float facilitator, warned us ahead of time. He said, sometimes for some people, you know, they need a little pillow thing, right? And I was like, a neck pillow. Yep, and those are there. And he told us, you know, you can hang them, you know, once you get into the tank, you hang them on the little thing. This is what I do. So I got in there, I hung the pillow, right? And I'm in the tank. Right.
Naked.
And I'm naked. I'm standing there with the door open, right? 1 foot in the tank. It was exactly as Stephen described. There's about 11 inches of water in there. Right. And I sit down in this, and immediately you can tell how buoyant and weightless you are.
Hey, you can't sit down.
Right? You have to kind of like brace yourself. And I was like kind of...
Just tip over like a seesaw.
I was tipping. So picture a naked sawtooth trying to get his footing and sit down. And I'm tipping over.
Like a cow?
I'm tipping over in this tank. And finally I get myself settled. Now, Brandon had given us all sorts of instructions, right? About, like Stephen mentioned, there's a light when you first lay down. Right, and then when you're all ready to begin the experience, right, you press the button, right, and the light goes off. All right. Was this reflective of your experience getting in the tank?
Yes.
All right. Anything you want to share?
No, I think you went to excruciating detail.
Yeah. Now, I like that Stephen mentioned, I was expecting these coffins, but these are not coffins. These tanks, they're spacious.
They're like big bathtubs, basically.
They're spacious.
But they're covered.
Yeah.
Like you're in a cabin, as Stephen has described.
A cabin, a float cabin. Yeah. And so you get in there, and you know, the door's closed, you tap the light, it shuts off, and
then you're floating.
And
then you make all these micro adjustments.
Is that what you did? You made micro adjustments?
Yeah, I had to use the neck pillow because I didn't like just.
See, I thought I was going to try to be a tough guy, Steve, and I'm not going to use this neck pillow.
No, I did the same thing. I laid down and then I was like,
I brought it in with me, and then I noticed. So I'm lying there, I'm floating, right, and like immediately, the first thing that hits me is I kind of lost. Stephen described this a little bit. I lost my my sense of
what?
My body in space.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't tell if I was lying down or if I was vertical. Like I just felt like I was floating in outer space, right? Which was a really, it was, at first it was kind of a strange sensation. I don't think I've ever felt that before.
Yeah.
Right. Then my neck started.
It's weird because
yeah,
like you can't even tell if your eyes are closed or open.
Yeah.
Because it's so dark.
Yeah. Then my neck started hurting. Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right.
You need the neck pillow.
Because I have back and neck issues. I was like, all right, let me, because it was distracting me. It was pulling me out of the experience. So I was like, all right. I listened to Brandon. I put the pillow on the thing. I'm going to get the pillow. So that's what I did. I got the pillow. I put it on under my neck. And then I just started to relax, Stomping Jen. Right. And my neck stopped hurting. And I was able to kind of get back into the experience. Once I did that, then I really began to kind of focus on trying to surrender myself to the experience. Because it was such a new experience for me initially. Like, I think I was having trouble relaxing. So I remember this Brandon was fantastic because I remember he told me to breathe. He's like, if you get in there and you're just not feeling, quite settled in, breathe. Focus on your breathing. So that's what I did. Started focusing on my breathing. Right. And then I began to relax a bit. And one of the things I've been doing, Stephen, a lot of lately is reading books about UFOs and the phenomenon, as it's called. And some people believe there's a consciousness component to UFOs. Right. So I began to focus on projecting my consciousness out into space as I'm floating in this tank. Right. That's what I was doing.
To hear it.
And I'm really focusing on projecting my thoughts out into space. Right. And with the intention of communicating with the
UFOs,
aliens.
Okay.
Right. I did that for a while, then kind of I was just floating around, and then all of a sudden, a giant face appeared to me.
A face?
In the blackness. It just came out of nowhere. It was a gigantic, tan, kind of alien-looking face, and it was just looking at me.
I think you read too much UFOs.
I'm telling you what happened to me, Stomping Jen, and I was shocked because I didn't think something like that was going to happen to me, right? I wasn't on any substances, nothing. I just was focusing on this, and I didn't know where I was. I thought I was in space, kind of, and eventually it just kind of receded away. It didn't say anything to me. It didn't communicate anything to me, but I saw this. As clear as I see you, Stomping Jen, as clear as I see Stephen, I saw this face. You didn't have anything like that?
I didn't have a face, no.
No, and then I started seeing lights.
I saw lights.
I began seeing like purple swirling kind of lights.
I saw purple swirling.
That was you?
Yeah, that wasn't you.
Oh.
I told you about that.
I saw lights too, but describe your lights.
It was like 3/4 of the way in. That like I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed.
Was this your? That's what I was going to ask you. Were your eyes open or closed?
I have no idea.
Whoa.
No, I don't know. It was weird. And then I did fall asleep at some point because like when you think you've fallen asleep, like when you're in your bed and then you have that sensation of falling and you jerk awake, like that.
Yes,
happened to me. Like the water like splashed up because I jerked awake. But yeah, no, there was some point like where I did see like out of I don't know where, it was just like purple. It was definitely purple, and it was definitely like swirling around in front of me, but I have no idea where it was coming from.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I definitely saw some lights of some kind. The alien face.
Maybe it was coming from the aliens.
I know, right?
In Sawtooth.
Yeah,
they were landing.
I mean, I was surprised, and for me, it happened towards the end too, because as I was talking to Stomping Jen afterwards, Stephen, I was like, part of it for me was, it was such a new experience for me, like my first float, the first, I think, like half of it ish was like my body and my mind getting used to the new experience, right? Which is why I want to go back, right? Because like I've had that experience now. My body and mind know what to expect, so I feel like I can go into the tank and just like really let go. Anyway, so that's why I'm gonna get back there. And so then, and I had no real sense of time either.
Yeah, time seemed to go on forever.
And we did the 60-minute float, and there were points where I was struggling to try to understand how much time had passed. And I didn't, I had taken off my watch and left that out, and I wasn't going to look at it anyways because I wanted to just see what it was like. But it was really, really, for me, it was a really interesting experience being in there. And then I got out. I had to get out. So you're lying in there, and then there's like an alert system that begins to tell you what it's like, that it's beginning to end, and
brings you back.
Yeah, the float facilitator prepares you for this, right? So you know to expect this, so you don't freak out. And then I came back.
You came back?
Yeah, and then I got out
from your journey in space.
I got out of the float tank, and then I showered. I did all the stuff afterwards, and
you got dressed.
And I got dressed, and I met you outside, and afterwards, and then Stephen was out there to meet us, and we talked for a little bit, and I felt very relaxed after this float, like almost like a
massage,
It was on that level. I definitely felt altered, kind of, in a way, in like a positive way. I liked this float.
You're so funny.
What about you?
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. There was like a point in time where I was like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah. What was that? Because you didn't know what time it was? What was that?
I was just done at some point. I was like, I like had enough of just being in the water. Yeah.
I want to go, I definitely want to go in I'm going to go in for a longer session. Yeah. Because I need to communicate with this alien that I saw.
Did he have a name?
No, I just saw it. I just saw it. It just appeared to me.
Can I ask a question, Stephen? Like, yes. So it's a therapy of sorts, right? Like flotation therapy. Is that like, so what are the benefits of a therapy like this? Or what?
Well, typically they've been doing science finding that particularly people that float regularly become younger and wealthier.
Oh.
Huh.
I'm just kidding.
I was like, oh.
Are you open? Are you open now? Because I'm ending this podcast and I'm coming to float with you now. Yes. I want to be younger and wealthier.
Yes.
So, okay, I know we throw the term flotation therapy on it, but really like the roots of this thing with John C. Lilly, floating is, to me, and to about John Lilly, is about like consciousness. So the industry is budding and it's become this like overall wellness thing. And where the therapy comes in is like, because of the high concentration of epsom salts, which is magnesium and sulfate, like magnesium is really good. A lot of people are deficient in magnesium. So that's where a lot of the relaxation comes from alone, physically. We make the joke in the industry that like, it's not even the sensory deprivation. It's just the fact that people are finally getting boosted with their magnesium doses that makes them feel so good. But I really do think it's a combination of both. I mean, as far as there's two aspects to the therapy, I would say, is the physical and the mental. Most people really come in for the mental, just because if you were to just sit alone in a room with no phone nowadays with technology and distractions for an hour, you're probably going to be a lot better off and feel better for it. There is science. There's there was a lab in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Justin Feinstein was the head scientist there. It's still there. It's called the Tulsa Institute, or what is it called there? I can't remember the acronym right now. Mm-hmm. And they were doing science on like people with anxiety. So it's like that kind of therapy. People are coming in for stress and like anxiety, which is kind of ironic because the catch-22 is that people coming in, or the idea of floating, can cause like stress and anxiety. So that's why people are coming in mentally. And then like physically, people, like you mentioned, you had back pain, people with muscle soreness, athletes come in. Floating is really popular in professional sports, actually. It's kind of a secret. I mean, the Patriots that I know of have been like kind of the longest in this than most other sports teams. And it was like, they're not like, hey, look at everyone, we're floating, because it was like a competitive edge. But a lot of sports facilities now have float tanks in their locker rooms. I know Tom Brady even has one at his house. I don't know what he's doing down in Tampa nowadays, but I know
younger and wealthier.
Yeah,
that man does not age.
There you go. I wasn't kidding. I was not kidding.
Yeah.
Tom Brady is living proof of that statement.
For sure.
We need a float tank in our basement.
Yeah,
Get on that.
Yeah. So that was my first thought after my first float. I was like, how could I get one of these in my house? So that's where the whole therapy thing comes in, which is great and it's true and it works. But like John Lilly did not invent a float tank so you could like relieve your back pain, you know? Mm-hmm. So John was really into like Eastern mysticism, and he was getting into meditation, and in the 60s he was getting into acid, and then he was dropping acid and getting into the float tanks. And we're joking about Sawtooth's alien visions, but John Lilly had reports of communicating with far off civilizations and aliens inside of the float tanks.
That's crazy.
And,
looking up go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to share a quote with you that can fully encapsulate what John's kind of ideas of floating in the mind, and the human potential that the mind has, and what it can do when there's when there's no distractions. He says, in the province of the mind, what one believes to be true either is true or becomes true within certain limits. These limits are to be found experimentally and experientially. When so found, these limits turn out to be further beliefs to be transcended. In the province of the mind, there are no limits. However, in the province of the body, there are definite limits not to be transcended. So that's like a little glimpse of like John Lilly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and lest anybody think I'm kidding, like I wasn't joking about that, right? A lot of the stuff I'm reading about UAP, that's what we'll call them, unidentified aerial phenomenon. The deeper you go into this, you realize there is this connection around consciousness to it. And then the government has been studying the application of consciousness for a long time. The CIA, for years and years and years, studied remote viewing, and they concluded that it works, right? Like they
using float tanks too.
Yes, and that was part of their application of remote viewing. And so like I was just, again, I got in there, this is something I knew about and been reading about, and just decided to try it. Now, did what appeared to me, was that just a manifestation of my consciousness? I don't know. Was it something else? Possibly, but there's something there, Stomping Jen. I see that look.
What look?
Like, Sawtooth is...
We're going to talk about floating and not aliens.
Yeah, well, no, I'm saying...
Indifference.
Yeah, what I'm saying is there was it wasn't scary to me. It was satisfying to me on a mental level, right, to have that experience, right? And it was also one of the other benefits is like this. People, Stephen mentioned this. Like people use it as in meditative applications, right? So you have this mental, physical, and meditative way to use this, right? And I don't know. I can see a great potential in it for me. So I'm going to explore it more. Go ahead.
I can't imagine people tripping in one of those things. I don't know.
Yeah, well, John Lilly he was on another level.
I mean, that's like a long time.
Is he the guy who talked to dolphins on acid?
Yes.
That's the guy?
That's the guy.
Okay. That's interesting.
What?
Yeah.
He also experimented with, while he was on LSD, communicating with dolphins.
Well, they did an experiment called the Lily House, the Lily Dolphin House, where he was trying to, not him specifically, he had a research partner, this woman, I forget her name. She was trying to teach this one dolphin named Peter English. She was trying to teach the dolphin English. And at one point, they did give Peter some LSD. And the further they got into researching dolphins, John realized how exceptionally intelligent these beings were, and called off all studies when Peter committed suicide. Dolphins are intelligent enough to do that. It just stopped. He stopped breathing because all this research was making him depressed. And so John Lilly was like, uh-oh, like this is not right. But that was the main, because so John was getting involved with NASA, and they were saying like, hey, listen, if we're trying to communicate with other beings in the universe,
right?
Yet we can't even communicate with other beings on Earth.
Right.
So why don't we see what that would be like before we're running around into space trying to communicate? Yeah,
and we treat these clearly sentient beings, right, in the most horrific ways. You know, the way we keep in captivity these dolphins and killer whales and even octopuses. You know, Europe recently recognized that
lobsters, crabs.
Yeah, and octopuses are sentient beings, and that we should not
eat them.
Yeah, torture them. I'm all for that, by the way. I think that was the right move. Did you ever see The Octopus Teacher, My Octopus Teacher, that documentary?
No, I've heard about it though. I'm actually really also into Terrence McKenna. I don't know if you've heard of them, but him, he's incorporates some education on octopi, octopuses, they about how amazing and intelligent they are, and so I'm well aware.
And they have like these like incredibly short lifespans too. Like they don't live long. They live like a year.
What?
And they in the space of that year, they somehow are able to develop these incredible intelligences. They're fascinating. I'm never eating
octopus.
Or squid or any of that stuff again after seeing.
Yeah, they can like communicate visually through like color and vision, and so that was some of Terrence's ideas that eventually. Like that's what we will be doing as humans, because like language is limiting. And so like, and that's what Elon Musk is working on, right?
With the chip.
The Neuralink. So, so we'll be able to communicate with each other visually rather than audibly.
You just be able to look at people and think about them. I mean, I feel like, I don't know. I don't think that's a good thing, actually. I don't feel like I want people to know what I'm thinking.
What's that show on HBO? Made to Love or whatever?
Oh, right. That one where they have the chips, right? Where they can read each other's minds. It's about, it doesn't work out for them.
That's a comedy.
Yeah. All right. Let's circle back to floating. So anyone can float, right? And I mean, this is not reserved for athletes. It's not reserved for podcast hosts. Anyone can float.
Anyone can float.
Yeah.
I mean, so what I've noticed over 3 years here is that like there definitely are people who have like a certain disposition that take to it more. So like going back to people floating for different reasons, like some people might literally just come in and float because like they have back pain and that's it for them. Although what's interesting is some of those people find that like, you know, they're not expecting the whole cerebral aspect, and that, you know, they drop into the void and they're like, whoa, you know, what was that? But yeah, most people who are like coming for like, who are like experienced meditators, I think it's that crowd that really connects and vibes with floating more than others.
Have you ever had to talk to somebody who like just came out of the tank and was like, Steven, I need to sit down and tell you about this experience I had? It completely rocked my world. Like, does that happen to people?
Yes. I mean, not like nothing like traumatizing or like something they couldn't experience. I mean, if anything, sometimes people just like one thing leads to another, and now they're telling me about their childhood and their mother and this and that, you know. Some people get out and they just, you know, they grab a glass of water and they're out the door. But yeah, some people do really open up. Yeah. I've had the pleasure of like forming relationships with a lot of people that come through, because we do get regulars with the idea of like floating being a practice, like meditation. And I'm sure, as you know from your first experience, you know that the next time it's like, oh, well, I know I'll do this next time, and I know a little bit what to expect, and I'll be able to drop in and relax a little easier. And so, you know, those type of people that do come back, like every now and then, like, you know, they have something profound that they like to share, but nothing that like, you know, like, I don't know about rock their world, but
yeah, maybe that's the wrong way to say it. Like,
rock your world.
Well, like, do people come out with like, tell you, I just had a super profound experience in there, and I want to share it with you, and you know. Yeah.
Well, for example, I mean, top of mind today, I had this woman come in. It was her first float, and she was sharing with me that she was thinking of like birth and death simultaneously, how like floating was a portal to each of those entryways into the world. Yeah. And then she also went on to share how her father just passed away last year, and, you know, meditating on the whole death thing. And she was like thinking about how this is a very like death phobic culture, and she was really getting into that. And she like felt the presence and energy of her father. And like, this is a woman, I've never met her in my life, you know, and it's like, here's a stranger like opening up. That's my favorite thing about, you know, facilitating the floats, is like, you meet a stranger, let alone these people you get to meet. And it's like, you know, you can go into some really deep, serious stuff right away. You know, you don't have to, you know, it's not like we're talking about the weather in here. We're talking about, you know, the deep stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What?
No, I'm just thinking about the list I have of things I want to do differently. Like, I remember you saying to me, you know, some people find the water too warm, right? Like, and I didn't think of this. Like, my body temperature tends to run a couple degrees lower, right? I'm like a 90.
Oh yeah, we did talk about that after, right?
Yeah, I'm like a 95 to 97. So like part of for me, right? Part of my first couple minutes in there, I felt a little hot, right? So like, oh, next time, and I think you said this, like, you can make an adjustment if you know somebody's coming in and they prefer the water a little cooler or hotter or whatever. So like, I have my list of items, like, of what I want to do differently, so I can get more out of the experience for me.
You got your list.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, I try to keep the water a little on the warmer side, because if you're warm, you can crack the door, but if you're too cold, there's nothing you can do. It is a very delicate, you know, situation, but like when dialed in, it's like, whoa, you can really lose track of that boundary and kind of drop out. It is tricky though, because like you said, like people have different body temperatures. Like in general, typically men run a little warmer, women run a little cooler. But yeah, for the most part, people are pretty comfortable in there. The biggest thing really is the whole neck thing. I really try to coach people up on that, especially if it's their first float. Yeah. Because when you're in, you know, regular water, and you're in the pool and like kind of floating, there's that tendency to kind of like tread and make micro adjustments and move. Yep. And like this, you're not used to being fully supported out by water. So even though you think you're relaxed and you're letting your head fall back, your subconscious is holding your head up, because it's thinking, if I completely let go, my eyes are going to go under. Yeah. But they don't. And so you really have to just surrender into that. And that's something you'll learn with like the continued floating practice. And to me, to get the full floating experience really does. And you don't really want to use that neck pillow thing. You know, once you really just are able to like let go And it's like, because I struggled with it at the beginning of my floating practice.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like, once you figure it out, it's like, oh, like now I get it. It's just a surrender to the water and it's just trusting it.
Yeah, and it's that letting go that's hard, right? It's hard for people on so many spectrums of life.
Yeah.
It's like letting
mentally,
go.
physically, both.
Yeah, and like it was definitely, for me, it was definitely muscular. Like I felt like my neck just like you said, it was just like wanting to hold itself up, and then it just started like tensing. And even though I was breathing, I was struggling to find a way to release it, right? Yeah. And then when I grabbed the pillow, it was a little easier for me.
Oh, the other issue I had was my ears kept popping.
Is that because you didn't put the
probably
plugs
didn't
in,
put them
right?
in correctly or whatever.
That's another big thing. It's like people their first float and they're like, my earbud kind of came out a little bit, and next time you really got to get that tuned in. Yeah. Maybe you had a little cut you forgot about and that's stinging, or you drank coffee too close to your appointment. There's all these little details and intricacies that you figure out as you go, and but once you figure that out, and you can really get deep into this whole floating thing.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, where do you get the salt? Like, where do you buy the Epsom salt for it? Because I remember seeing these gigantic, look like 50, probably 60-pound bags, like stacked up. Yeah. Like, where do you get those?
I mean, there's all different manufacturers. I've been through a few. I'm currently using San Francisco Salt Company. It's one of the more popular ones in the float industry. In the float industry, though, like, there's like grades, there's like agricultural grades, and we get like one that's a little cleaner, just to like take out some of like any like impurities or anything like that. But it's basically just, like I said, Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate.
Yeah. And how often do you have to replace the salt? Do you churn through that stuff like in huge volumes? Is that like a huge part of?
Not so much. So really, with the water being at 11 inches at the end of the week, it goes down to 10 after about 6 days of use. And we're closed on Tuesday, so I'll get in there and do all the water balancing. And I add another inch of water and about 25 pounds of salt. And so it's like every other week I'll put a 50-pound bag in, or sometimes I'll split it up and do 25 each week.
So water
balance. That's really all it is.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so water balancing, you have to be a chemist too, right? So you have to be checking that water.
Yes, it's really not. I was really intimidated by it, like upon opening and like getting into all of this. It's really not that complicated. I can talk a little bit about that for a while, because that's a big concern for a lot of people, is like the cleanliness of the water.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so obviously with all that salt in there, like there's a reason that like before refrigeration, people would ship fish across sea with just salt, and it would be fine. So
salt cod.
Salt cod. Well, yeah, no cod in our tanks, but definitely
I didn't see any in there.
Yeah, the salt definitely does its part in keeping the water clean. And so what's interesting about the float industry is this guy, was it Peter Sufield was the scientist, or some other guy who was experimenting in the 80s with different means of for keeping public waters clean. And most of the float industry uses this combination of UV in the filter with hydrogen peroxide. So that's what we put in the water, liquid hydrogen peroxide at 35%, which is really strong, but it obviously dilutes down in the water. And so when there's that H2O2 residual in the water running through the UV, that's what cleans the water, because we don't want to be putting anything harsh like bromine or chlorine in the water.
Right.
Because in that enclosure of that small space, you don't want to be breathing in that toxic fume. Right. Also not good for the skin, or just really in general for the human system. So the H2O2 UV has been working great. There's also like a filter, just like your typical, like your thinking pool, hot tub filter, like a pleated filter that catches like debris or any like loose particles or hair or anything that gets in there. Yeah. So we run that in between each float. It does a total of 3 turnovers, which means that all the water in the tank is going through the filter 3 times before the next person gets in. And we get our water tested. We've never had any issues. Most float centers that are doing their due diligence don't. And what I've learned, I've actually had to take a certified pool operator course in order to open, which seems a little silly to me because obviously we're not running pools and hot tubs, but again, float tanks don't really have a category of their own yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I learned about public waters was a bit disturbing, to be honest with you, in public pools and even pools at home, which I never thought twice about getting in. I'm now a little skeeved out about, which is another interesting thing because people are so concerned about getting in these float tanks and how clean it is, yet won't think twice about getting in their neighbor's pool who has absolutely no idea what they're doing.
Right.
And, and all that harsh chlorine and how bad that is for you. And I learned that if you can smell chlorine in the water, it's because they did it wrong. Like you shouldn't be able to smell it.
Yeah.
And I also learned that if you were to take a shower, lukewarm 60-second shower before getting into water, it removes up to 80% of the filth, for lack of a better term, that would get into the water. So not only do you take a shower, it's more than 60 seconds, and we have soap and shampoo for you to use. So our water is, it's probably some of the cleanest public water that you'll get in.
Yeah, I mean, we spent an hour in that water, Stomping Jen, and I was fine. I didn't get any lesions. My skin didn't burn. I didn't get dried out.
It will burn if you have a cut, but that's because of the salt, not because it's like contaminated.
Yeah, I'm cut free. I take a lot of care not to get cuts, Stomping Jen. A lot of care.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people will come out and be like, "Oh, I didn't realize I had a cut till I got in there." You know?
Yeah, but I think my point is, though, I think we were in this water and we were fine. It was clean, and I could see the UV light.
You were going to talk earlier. You mentioned something about why people have to do it naked. Did you want to talk more about that now?
Sure, yeah. So, because people ask that every now and then, you get someone who's like really skeeved out about like, oh, I don't know about being naked in there, and it's just funny because like having a bathing suit, it's just like the water's still going to get between that layer of your skin and the bathing suit. It's just like this weird taboo thing people have in their head. So if very rarely, but sometimes people are like very hard on like they want to wear a bathing suit, and like we recommend it against it for 2 reasons. One is because of like the tactile sensation. And the example I use is like, if you're wearing like a little string bracelet or one of those little like rubber Lance Armstrong bracelets, which I've worn in the past, I go about my day not feeling it or recognizing it. But if I'm in the tank and I have that on, it agitates me because there's no other sensory input. My brain is just like searching for anything. And it's just like, what is that? And so you can imagine with the bathing suit, it would be like times 10 because that's all over you. The other reason being that like, because our water is so clean, bathing suits can actually, not that they do, but they can contaminate it. Like if for some reason you're running late for your appointment and you go and you grab your moldy bathing suit at the bottom of the hamper, or you put too much laundry detergent in it, or heaven forbid there's some sort of stains in there, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah.
So it's better to it's cleaner to be in the nude.
Yeah, shower, get naked, and honestly, being naked puts you in kind of a more of a vulnerable, open state. Which is why some people get nervous about that.
Yeah. But it's part of the surrender, and it's part of like the womb-like experience.
Yeah. And something Stephen said popped into my mind, which is your brain is struggling to find inputs, right? And that's one of the things that was occurring to me as I was floating there, and not knowing which way was up or down or vertical or horizontal, was I felt my brain like reaching out, looking for something to try to like get input on. And it was initially like a disconcerting sensation, but my brain and body began to relax into that. And it's because we're so bombarded all the time with input. I don't walk from point A to point B without listening to a podcast usually, right? I don't, you know, I'm always getting input from something, you know. And that I love the way you said that, Stephen. It's like your body and brain are struggling to find some input. And if you have like rings and bracelets and bathing suits on, you're giving it something that for that experience, you know, probably don't want to have.
Yeah, that's why I think floating is important now more than ever with all this technology. And I'm not one of those people who points to technology as being evil and it's destroying us, and who knows, for all we know, it could be. But I think it's just part of what's happening, and we need to embrace it and, you know, take the good and leave the bad. But life is distracting enough. But now that we have these little computers in our pockets 24/7, it can be rather damaging. I don't know if y'all have heard about that Social Dilemma documentary.
Oh yeah, we watched that. That's disturbing.
Yeah, scary stuff. Yeah, especially with the youth, the young men and women of this world, the young girls who are super overconscious and anxious because of like image issues and all this. And so we really just need a break from this stuff. And so that's a silver lining with floating right now, and why things have been so busy, I think, is because people are really anxious and stressed due to a lot of the technology that's happening. And what I really believe in more than floating is just this whole mindfulness term going around. And you know, people kind of, how like the analogy I use is like with what happened in the West with yoga, you know, coming into the 60s, where it was like this niche thing that the weird stretchy thing the hippies were doing, and now you know, everyone and their mother literally is doing yoga. And I think what we're starting to realize in the States, that yoga is more than just movement. From what I understand, I listened to Michelle's podcast. She's a good friend of mine, actually. I don't know if you guys knew that. Shout out to
I didn't.
Serenity.
Yep.
Yeah. Shout out to Serenity Yoga and over there in South Hadley. So she was explaining that really all that stretching was about so you could just limber your body up enough to sit and meditate. And so people we lost that connection here, and we're starting to realize it. But people in the West have a really hard time sitting still and doing this whole meditation thing. And so that's where I think floating comes in. It's like the cheat code to that, right? Sometimes I'll refer to it as like a forced meditation. So I'll walk you through my first experience a little, what happened 14 years ago, my first float. I remember being in there just thinking like, you know, like, why did I drive an hour to do this? I remember this is stupid. This is boring. Like, what am I like, you know, and I almost wanted to get out, but then I was thinking like, you know what, like I did drive this far. I did pay this money. Yeah. I'm naked. I'm laying down. Like I might as well just like wait this out. Whereas like, in my previous meditation practices at home, it's so easy to just stop. It's so easy to get distracted. But because of the whole floating being in a commitment, that's where like the forced meditation idea comes in. And not only is it forced meditation, there's no distractions. And so going back to the stretching to be, you know, physically fit enough to sit, like, you know, Sawtooth, you mentioned you got some back issues. So I could imagine meditating in a, you know, the upright position probably wouldn't be too easy for you. But in the tank, when your body's not even an issue and you have no distractions, it's like, forget about it. This is like a supercharged meditation. And in the West, we need all the help we can get with shortcuts because that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. There's so much there. Like, so I've started stretching because of my back issues in the last couple of months. I've been doing it for like 3-4 months, like every night. Not
yoga though.
Well, I'm doing like very rudimentary.
Doing preliminary
like
yoga.
Michelle, I've connected with her. I've shared with her. Did she turn you on to wall pose? Do you know what that is?
I know what wall pose.
I don't know wall
Legs
pose.
at the wall.
Yeah,
get Sawtooth. I'm telling you, Stomping Jen, get Sawtooth onto the wall pose. It can do wonders for your back.
Legs at the wall.
Yeah, but like what Stephen was saying is I've had to learn and train myself just how to sit cross-legged on the floor. Like I'm now at a point where that's comfortable for me. Like, really? And it's been 4 months. Yeah, I told you I can't.
Yeah, he'll sit on the ground and be like, "Why am I sweating?" Just sitting here trying to touch my feet.
Yeah.
That's what float tanks are for.
Yeah. But it's right. Like, and that takes practice, right?
Yes,
And it takes
that's
effort.
why they're called practice.
But something Stephen was saying about his first experience in the float tank, and it resonates a little with my own, is that I had to like commit to the experience a bit because it was challenging to me a little bit because of the lack of input. And then this sensation that I was just my mind floating in blackness, and like I'm also grappling with, am I just my consciousness? Like it began to like get me into these like, you know, these places. But I kind of did what, you know, Stephen did. I was like, you know, they were kind enough to let us experience this. I'm going to get through it all. I need to get to the end of this, right? And I really began to mentally try to button myself down, and I'm glad I did. You know. Mm-hmm. I have to ask you about this. It was our anniversary when we came, and I was hoping there would be a double float tank that Stomping Jen and I could get.
Then that would be sensory input. That's the wrong button.
This is a common question, actually, and some float centers do provide this service.
What?
And yeah, like a double wide tank that you can float with a partner. And so I understand why people would want to do that. However, like Stomping Jen just mentioned, I am in that camp where like I think it defeats the purpose of what floating and sensory deprivation is, because let's face it, you're hearing someone breathe, you're bumping into them. It's not quite sensory deprivation. But the example I use as a pro for why it's a good idea is that like it's the idea of like meditating by yourself versus like a group meditation. There really is something to that, and that shared space and like meditation frequency that you're in. But we don't provide that service. You know, we do have the 3 tanks. So I think that, you know, people just settle on, okay, well, we can float at the same time in different rooms. If you're really into that, my friends down in Hartford at Float 41, they have a double tank and they will let you do that there.
No kidding. I'm writing this down, Stomping Jen.
Oh my God, you're full of like romantic, strange
Flomantic.
Flomantic. We're
gonna go to the throw wheel, flinging mud at each other.
And then we're going to float.
And then we're going to float, right? We'll have to shower off so we don't get the...
Yeah, but it's not a new idea. Somebody already did it. I'm only interested in innovative ideas.
Okay.
All right, so Stephen, when we're preparing for a float, I read on the website, and I got this helpful email before. It's not a good idea to eat a lot or drink a lot right before the float, right? We want to get in there and
not have to worry about
that stuff,
breaks.
Right?
Yeah. So, I actually just want to touch upon what you said about like how the beginning of your float was a struggle, because I had some thoughts, and then we can jump back into like
absolutely.
best tips for setting yourself up for success before your float.
Yep.
So most people think about floating as like in general as like this relaxation thing, which is why like honestly most people come to do this. And then what they find is like floating is not always a relaxing thing, especially if you're just getting into it, like meditation. People are like, oh, I'm going to meditate so I can be so relaxed when I do it. And it's like, wow, this is not relaxing or relieving any of my stress. And so people kind of, you know, you work through that, and that's part of its work, you know? And so what I tell people is like, they have this idea in their head, they're going to drop into the void. They're just going to be in like, you know, nirvana or samadhi for the next hour. And then they're going to come out in bliss and so on and so forth. And when you get in there, some things come up, past traumas, physical agitation, being fidgety, so on and so forth. And what I try to get through to people is that the example I use is a massage. Say you're getting like a deep tissue massage versus a relaxation Swedish massage. The deep one, like it's not always about being relaxed during the session. It's
hurts
about
like
afterwards.
hell sometimes.
Yes. And so it hurts like hell for the brain too. But you wouldn't have the expectation to go into the gym and lift the heaviest stuff. You realize it's a process, and floating in meditation, I think, is like a gym for the mind. So you have to build your way up to it. And so what most people find, and what I find for myself personally, I'll speak for myself, even some of my more challenging floats, afterwards, I feel better for it afterwards. I feel relaxed afterwards. And it's like the gym. The gym is hard, you're busting, and then you feel good afterwards. And so I just wanted to make that point and let people know to not have this expectation that it's going to be this like, the most relaxing thing ever, although you probably will feel very relaxed afterwards.
Yeah. I think that resonates with my experience. Yeah. All right. So I'd asked about eating and drinking before, right? We don't want to do a lot of that.
Stephen was going to give us tips for success.
Tips for success.
And tricks. Yes. Yep. So as far as drinking, the main thing you want to avoid is caffeine. So coffee, energy drinks, anything like that, because you don't want to have like any stimulants in your system before a float. I also will say that, like, I mean, maybe you do. Who's to say? We do try to have this thing where, like, we don't want to, like, limit people. Obviously, like, no, like, drug use or alcohol use. That's absolutely a no for, safety reasons. But at the float conference, I heard this story of this author. This float center had this author that would come in and drink a Red Bull or two before his float session in order to just, like, ramp up and have, like, uninterrupted, like crazy thoughts whirling through his mind. But in general, like, you want to be, you want to be relaxed. And also, like, caffeine can make you have to like urinate. And so you don't want to have to get out and like break your flow and do that. So avoid liquids too much in general. And the food, people have questions with that. It's like, you want to have a happy medium. You don't want to like starve yourself or fast for hours, because then you're going to be uncomfortable. Your stomach's going to be grumbling. And you also don't want to eat a turkey dinner before you get in there. So, maybe just a light meal an hour or two before your float is sufficient. We always recommend people use the bathroom before they float. I'm very annoying about it, and I have no shame in asking people 2 or 3 times if they say no. Are you sure? And they're like, I'm an adult, I think I know. I'm like, listen, like, even if you don't have to use the restroom, please just try anyway. You can usually find something in there. Try to make light of it. I'll often ask people to empty their tank before they get into our tank. So it's like a nice, funny way to get them to go in there. What else? Tips and tricks. I like to schedule a float like at least a day before, so you can kind of like prepare for it mentally. Every now and then you get someone who comes in who like is bringing their friend or their partner as like a surprise. And sometimes the people don't even know what floating is. And although surprises are fun for some people, I don't think that's a good idea, because people are thrown off. Like literally, I mean, like, have never even heard of floating. Yeah. And now they're in here like, oh, I'm like going to do this thing. So yeah, I just try to like think about it before. There's really not much. Oh, another big one is shaving, right? So Brad, I ran this by you and you're like, that's not going to be an issue for me.
No, I'm one hairy guy.
Yeah. But even for women who like shave their legs or armpits or whatever, like razor burn can occur, or if you get like a little cut or stubble, like that's going to sting in the water because it's so salty. So that's definitely something to keep in mind too. We do have most of these tips and tricks in our FAQ, and we send it in the email as well.
Now, I was talking, I don't remember if I was talking to you or Stephen. So I have been fortunate enough in my life to go to the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
And float in the Dead Sea. But the salt content in the Dead Sea must be way higher than what you guys have in the tank.
It's not way higher, but it is higher. It's higher. Unfortunately, from what I've heard, is that the Dead Sea is like it's like evaporating, and so it's starting to like scale over. Yeah, I've heard in our lifetime that could happen.
Yeah, I haven't been there.
So we all got to go and pay homage to the world's biggest float tank.
I want to go there.
I make a joke. Jesus was definitely floating in the Dead Sea, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
The Father above.
He had to be.
He had to be. He saw that face in the sky and was like, "Oh God, here we are."
There we go.
Did Lazarus? Who's that guy? The Baptist, John the Baptist. Was he at the Dead Sea?
I don't know anything about.
He would.
That was the Jordan River.
Jordan River. Okay, I thought it might be the Dead Sea.
I don't know anything about what you're talking about.
You said something that made me want to ask this, Stephen. What is the float tank professional, or the float therapy or sensory deprivation therapy? community, like the professional community?
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I've been to, when I had this idea to like, okay, I think I want to open a float center. I wasn't that naive to just like, rent a space and go. I was like, there's probably some things I should know. So
Yeah.
I'm, Googling away, and what comes up, like annual float conference. I'm like, you're kidding me. There's literally a conference about floating. So on the spot, I bought tickets to fly out to Portland, Oregon. And this was like 6 years ago, because like the inception of this place was like 6 years, even though next month will be our 3-year anniversary, or this month it's December in like a couple days. And so I went out there and I did the conference, and I did like a workshop about like how to do the construction and the building and all that type of stuff. And I've been to like 5 or 6 conferences now, and the float industry is just, the people are so amazing. Cause I mean, let's face it, it's people that are like into floating.
Yeah.
But the big thing that I've noticed with it is like its lack of competitiveness, because what it indoctrinated me with, and which I don't know if I would have like realized this without going, is say, for instance, the other float center, there's another float center in Northampton, and we were looking to open right about the same time. And they were able to gather their resources much sooner and open like a year before me. And so like, I was kind of nervous. And then what the float conference taught me was like, the main competition is not the other nearby float center. It's like the hundreds of thousands of people in your area who have never even heard of floating.
Right.
So like, I have 3 tanks, Euphoria has 2. That's 5 tanks in Western Mass for like 500,000 people.
Yeah.
So like, that's where the competition is. Yeah, that's the barrier. And so like, people are so giving with their time, and like people who are new, and like, how can I help you, and call me and ask me anything, sharing all their tricks of the trade and secrets. And it's a really great camaraderie that it's like nothing else. I've been working with this young lad down in, he's down in Mobile, Alabama, looking to open a float, and he's probably like 28 or something like that. And I feel so like blessed to now be the one to be able to help someone and tell him what I went through. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because that was going to be what I wanted to ask you after hearing you, is if you had a chance to be a mentor to somebody now that you've been in this game for quite a few years. His name is Drake. Shout out to Drake. He just got his LLC. He's looking to sign his lease soon. And so I'm walking him through that. We were just talking about the other day about his logo and some ideas on that. Yeah. I'm like, you got to get a lawyer. You got to get an accountant, Drake, just like, right. He's like, oh, word. Yeah. And I'm assuming that's all stuff that you learned by talking to people in the industry yourself and people. Yep. Yeah. Are there like, this is going to be the stupidest question I ask probably, is there like big float tank, is there like a big like corporate entity that wants to get into this just to make money? Because I want to say, like, Steven, you strike me as like somebody who is into this because you love it, you believe in it, and like obviously we all do stuff, we all have to make money to eat, live, blah 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 blah, but you don't seem to me like you're in this like from a big corporate level, like to become a bazillionaire just to become a bazillionaire. And
I mean, if you're looking to like, if money is your thing, like probably you don't want to like float, like opening a flotation therapy center is probably not your best way to go. There actually is unless you franchise, right? Which there is a franchise there's a couple in the float industry, the biggest one being True Rest. And, I've had some people that have floated at True Rest, and granted, like it depends on the manager. Like I know one in down in Cedar Park near Austin, my homie who owns that place, really, really great vibe. Like is doing a great job there. Definitely has similar energy with me. I had some people come that floated at another one, and they said they felt the corporate energy there. They felt, like you mentioned, at the way beginning with the decor of like the Apple Store vibe, and they're offering you like oxygen after, and
Oxygen.
yeah, like an oxygen bar. And it's very like sterile and all that. And so some people in the float industry, like with this particular franchise, like there was some drama that happened, and there was some bad blood between this franchise and the industry. But I'm in the camp of like, you know what, the more floating, the better. And if this person wants to make money and they're getting, you know, I don't think they have 100 locations yet, but say they did, like, I think that's great. It's like, you know, we need to
spreading the awareness.
Yeah, the more floating,
you just want
the
people
better.
to float.
How do we get?
Yes, that's what I want.
Promote the float.
That's what we're doing. We're promoting the float. Now, how the hell do we get these fucking greedy ass health insurance companies to help support us floating? What can we do? Can we write them?
I've heard that like sometimes even insurance just like isn't the way to go.
Yeah.
The way, like, I mean, I'm sure, like, I don't really know too much about that. I know of like they're trying to do it in Canada with floating. By the way, like floating is most popular in the States. Maybe only Australia is like getting really popular there, and like Canada, Europe, kind of, China's kind of getting in the game, but it's mainly those three countries, like US, Australia, and Canada. Yeah, I mean, I've heard some horror stories with like insurance and like what a pain it is, and you're not really getting paid and so on and so forth. I mean, I wish it was, you know, just super easy and it was super accessible, but yeah, that would be great. It's mental health. It's like, you know, people need this. It's helping them. I have some people come in here who's like, this has been doing more for me than therapy.
Yeah. And you can combine the two. I talked to my therapist about my experiences in the float tank.
Oh, yeah.
There are some float centers that have therapists on
site.
On site, who will work with you. They were actually doing experiments with, I know at least one float center with like a intercom system and doing a therapy session while floating. Now I don't know about that, but I mean it's a possibility. Yeah,
that sounds really interesting. But yeah, no, Stomping Jen, I unpacked some stuff with him.
Okay.
My therapist.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he was interested. I did talk to him about it. So Stephen, I mentioned your website a couple times. There's a lot of information there, right? And that's where people can go to find out about Go with the Float, right? And they can. How do you get a float session? Walk us through that. I did it, so I know how, but I want you to tell us.
Yeah, so the best way to do that would be to go onto the website, and right at the top of the page, there's like a book and experience button. We also do have infrared sauna and massage for anyone interested in that. And so that's why we say book an experience rather than book a float, because we have some other
services
modalities here. Yep. And so and then it will bring you to a separate landing page with the booking software, and it will show you all the days and times available. I think we mentioned all of our floats are 60, 75, or 90 minutes for the same price. Those 90-minute floats you're just going to get at the beginning and end of the day, while all the other floats you can do 60 or 75 at any time. A float is going to run you $65. We do have a 3-pack introductory where if you buy 2, you get 1 free. The idea is we'll create some value around that so you can commit to those 3 times, which, as we talked about, some people don't really vibe on it the first or second time, and it's, you know, it can be that third time where it's like, okay, now I get it. And from there, they're usually pretty hooked. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You can also call the shop and we can do it over the phone, but the booking software is pretty intuitive. Yeah. I mess everything up technologically, Stomping Jen. You know this.
You didn't mess it up.
Yeah, and I had to reach out to Steven, and Steven got back to me, right? I had to reach out, and so Steven's a real dude.
He's a hands-on owner.
And he'll get back to you possibly. So, you know, if you need to call or talk to somebody. I did want to ask you about infrared sauna, because I'd never heard of that before. Can you tell us a little bit about that, the technology and what it is?
Yeah, so I mean, most people are familiar with, just a traditional sauna. It's like it's a sweat box, you know. So the infrared is just like a different heating technology,
Yeah.
where our sauna has actually far and near infrared panels. So the idea is the far infrared panels, the heat is kind of like pushing through you, where the near infrared is good for like your skin and hair. The heat is a lot more, it's like a convection oven, right? So it's more like evenly distributed and like not as intense as like a hot traditional sauna, which is for most people a little, your average person, a little too much to handle. And so what's nice about the infrared is you can stay in there a little longer. There's a digital temperature control, so you can like turn it down if need be. And the sessions are run for 40 minutes. Okay. And so at the end of your 40 minutes, the time just goes off. And usually people who are more experienced, you know, there is somewhat of a heat tolerance, so you can work your way up to that. As far as the benefits, it's really the full gamut. You Google the benefits of sauna or infrared sauna. A lot of what will come up is like inflammation, immune system. It's honestly like a de-stressor too, just like sitting and sweating and getting that out. The sauna is another example of like, if you want to get real intense with it, it can become unbearable and uncomfortable, but afterwards you're going to feel great.
Yeah. I love being hot.
You do.
I do.
I hate it.
Well, it's sauna season. Let me say that. A lot of people ask too, hey, can I do both? Of course, a lot of people do. A lot of the order is kind of doing the sauna first works better. And then you hop in the float so you can rinse off, probably with a cool shower to bring your body temperature back down. And then you hop in the tank, which is nice because like if you're someone that's coming from work or home and you got kids and your house is crazy, instead of like getting right into the tank, you can kind of decompress in the sauna first. But that's what we have our lobby for too. And you said you felt calm when you walked in. Like I put a lot of thought into the layout and design because like I want people to like feel calm when they come in. And if you did want to come 10, 20 minutes early and just kind of like sit and relax and journal or read a book, that's totally an option.
Yeah. And in terms of the order, so I was talking to Stomping Jen earlier today, and I noticed there's a massage and float package. Do you recommend the massage first before the float? Is it the same as the sauna?
I would probably actually recommend the float first in that case, because the massage therapist would tell you that like if you do the float first, you're going to get on that table and be nice, and like your muscles will be nice and open and they can get in there. And not only that, some people are kind of nervous about massage and being touched, and so like the float can help relax you. But then again, some people are nervous about the float and the massage can relax you. So that one, I guess you just have to try both and figure out for yourself.
We got to book an escape. I want to book do all three of those. Can you do all three?
Yeah. Ooh, the trifecta. Yeah. Yes.
Will you do that?
I literally like when people do the trifecta, I'm literally like, congratulations. I
feel like you need a long time to do all
Let's take a day off.
It is a time commitment.
Play hooky with me. We'll take a day off and we'll go do all these three things.
You're running one of the best podcasts in the world.
Oh, thanks, man.
Steven.
And it's all, honestly, and I'm not just saying this because you're here talking to us, we live in such a fucking amazing area with so many like amazing people,
Shout out to the Valley.
Yeah.
That here.
Like Steven, I read an article about him in the paper. I reached out to him. He was like, yeah, let's talk, and come by, experience a float. And then, that was awesome too, because I feel like, having experienced it, we can talk a little more authentically about it. But all right. So we'll do that.
We're about the aliens.
We're going to do that. We're going to book a day there, Stomping Jen, right. You and I, we're going to do a thing. Stephen, there was a quote on your website that stuck out to me as I was prepping for this. I'm going to quote it. It's quote, "Please enter the float tank with a clean body, love, and no expectations," end quote, right? There's the no expectations thing again, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody, you're entitled.
We talked about that. We talked about the clean body.
You're entitled to your experience. Tell us about the love. What's the love?
The love. Oh my God. So that literally, it might have even been before we were open. I got the tanks. And so the most I've ever floated is before we were open, and I set up the first tank. I was floating all the time, like every day, every other day, 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. And one of my floats, I was like, it all just like that whole write up like came to me. I felt like I was like, oh, tomorrow I'm going to write this great thing. And I was like, I literally got out of the tank naked. I was like, I got to do this now. I felt like freaking like Jerry Maguire, you know, when he like writes his like, his like new, his idea for like what the agent should be. Yeah. So that was just like, I mean, I guess I don't know. And it's hard to define love. What do I mean by the love? Just like, the infinite void of like can be scary to some, but it can be very liberating if you're able to like really surrender, if you have the courage to surrender to it. That could be like what true love is, just the infinitude of nothing and expanding and merging and being one with everything.
Cool.
I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you. I surrendered to you, Stomping Jen.
Oh.
I had to hit that button, folks. That was me. All right, Stephen. All right. What do you like to do when you're not working or floating? What else do you find time for? Either to connect to yourself in another way, or just. Where can we
Honestly,
find
I'm here a lot, and I love being here. I do. It is a joy. I meet the greatest people. I have the best conversations. I love what I do. I'm so passionate about it. I've met so many amazing people. Facilitating floats is like so rewarding, and it's like truly in the giving that I receive.
Yeah.
And I love music. Like, I have a house that I live at, and I love like I love like planting plants, and like I got house plants, and I love being in the yard, and like I've grown cannabis the past 4 years. I really enjoy like being outside in my yard, sometimes being in my yard more than even like hiking, because I feel like connected and part of it, and like I'm forming it, and like landscaping and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've grown that plant, and I know Stomping Jen doesn't understand this necessarily.
Are we going to talk about this?
I feel human beings, we have an ancient connection to that plant, like we do to dogs, and there's something about it that was soul satisfying to me. I cannot explain it. I don't know what it is. I've tried to grow other things, and I was like, but that, and part of it is because I know it's going to provide me with, so much. Yeah.
The food isn't going to provide you with so much?
I just didn't feel the connection to it, the spiritual connection. I don't know how to explain it.
Have you ever read The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan?
No.
Oh, it's a great book. So the premise is like humans think that we are like, the dominant species on plant, like we're in control. We have full domain of the plants and animals, right?
Yeah.
And Michael makes a case for the fact that like the plants are actually controlling us. They're using us to spread their gene and their species. He uses as example 4 plants in the book: the tulip, the potato, cannabis, and an apple. Yeah. And without getting into it too much, you think of those 4 plants, and without humans, they'd be in very small portions of the world just doing their little thing. But because of humans, they're using they're everywhere now. Like cannabis plants are in places that they should not be in. Literally, there's 1,000 of them 100 feet away from me right now, growing in a warehouse building because they've manipulated us to spread them.
Yeah. That is a really interesting way to look at that. I'd never considered.
And so some plants, I think the point is that I was trying to get at is that I think that like humans, some plants are more intelligent than others. And I think that there is something to be said about like the cannabis intelligence more than say like, I don't know, fill in the blank of any other plant, a banana plant or something. Yeah. I don't know.
I got to find a tree biologist because I've talked about this before. It blew my friggin' mind a couple of years ago when I learned that trees actually are connected under the ground through
Yeah.
mycelium
They
networks.
communicate. Yeah, they communicate.
Through fungi, and that they're constantly talking to each other. Like a tree 10 feet away from another tree will move its branch that way to give a tree here room to go up.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It is
Not
like,
only that, if a tree is being eaten by a certain animal or insect, it will send a message down, all the way down. Hey, create this chemical so that when it gets to you, it won't want you to eat you.
I mean, doesn't that blow your mind, Stomping Jen?
It's too late at night.
Not as much as her purple lights inside of the float tank.
Yeah. All right. Last question. And you might know this question's coming. Maybe not. And I think you're going to have a good answer to this. Let me just say that.
Okay. Oh my God.
What have you experienced that you can't explain or have trouble explaining?
Oh, aside from floating?
Yeah, aside from floating.
That's like, I dedicate my life to this profession that it's like literally what I do. And people are like, what are you even talking about? You know?
Yeah.
Is that too obvious? Should I guess
no, whatever.
If that's the answer you want to give, that's okay.
No, I would say the psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
I don't know, particularly mushrooms. That's kind of my thing. That's like, I think the full blown high dose psychedelic experience is like the definition of ineffable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you, and I want to give you space to talk about it as much as you want to or not want to. When you say you can't explain it, did you encounter thoughts, visions, other undescribable things that made you take a step back and be like, wow, that is like nothing I've experienced before?
Oh yeah, the way I kind of explain it or look at it is it's not like it's not something that's always like, and some people will be like, oh, I have a notebook and I write things down, and when they have their experiences like this and whatnot. And for me, I think that more, even if you go so far, you can't even really remember much. It's almost like a subconscious download that happens. It's like John Lilly, his like magnus opus book, he's got several writings, is called Programming and Metaprogramming in the Human Biocomputer. And that term, the human biocomputer, sticks with me. Of like, it's like if your brain is a software system, a computer chip, and dude, it's like the Matrix, right? And you're downloading all these programs. Oh, I learned Kung Fu, you know, and it's like the mushroom being put in there is like, it blasts a certain software system into your brain that just like, whoa, I do not see things the same now. And like, in such as cannabis, and like, shout out to my mom, my poor mother, if she listens to this, but she's like, even when I was young and I got into cannabis, and she's like, well, you smoke cannabis and like, I don't like it because it alters you. And like, that's not who you are, and it changes it. And it's like, yeah, that's not who I am. And it changes me for the better. It puts me more in touch. This is ceremony. This is what people have been doing for thousands of years.
That's right.
That's why the patriarchy has like come to this like dominating like crazy state, because like we've lost touch with these plants. It's made me kinder. It's made me softer, more in touch with my feminine. And it's like, I think that this is a large part missing from society, which thank God we're getting back to. Thank God you can go get cannabis, and now in certain towns in Northampton, Somerville, Cambridge, Easthampton, they're not going to put you in jail if you want to like have a mushroom experience and get in touch with everything I just mentioned.
That's on my list. I've got to try that. Mushrooms, Stomping Jen.
Well, what's going to be great is with the decrim nature, what's happening is like, there's now people that like you can reach out to who have been doing this work for underground years, and who can come above ground and help you. Like, you don't have to do this work alone. And a lot of people should suggest that you shouldn't. And there'll eventually be places you can go to do this safely and securely. Unfortunately, those places are going to be really expensive at first, but there are people who are really talented and experienced that can help you affordably now.
Yeah. Go ahead. What?
I'm just thinking about.
Yes.
I don't want to talk about it.
What?
I'll
go
tell
ahead.
you later.
But tell me later. It might be funny if you say it right now.
Just like thinking about a guide, like a psychedelic guide.
Yeah. That's what I would need.
I think it's not
I
so
could
much a
not be your
guide. It's like
psychedelic guide.
Yeah.
I like to use the word sitter because when you're getting
Yes.
into guide, then you're talking about like
Yes.
programming and someone telling you
Yeah.
how to be. It's just someone to sit and make sure that you're safe
safe,
and comfortable.
yeah.
Like the guide is the plant. The
Yeah.
plant will guide you.
Yeah.
You've been my sitter one too many
No,
times.
no, no. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
be your sitter.
Okay.
I'm just
Thank you.
thinking about my sitter.
Noted. Yeah.
That's all.
Okay.
Well, he might need a sitter for his next float because who knows what you're gonna have to help me, Stomping Gem, because
Yeah.
who knows how many faces he'll see next
I
time.
know, for
Yeah.
real.
All right. And I'm going to report back on it once I get in there again, and it's coming soon because I'm feeling the urge.
All right.
Okay. Stephen Bryla.
Did you give him an opportunity to talk about anything that he wanted to talk about?
You are amazing.
Me?
Yeah. Stephen, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Or something we missed?
Anything
in
you
this
wanted?
discussion?
We
Anything?
talked about floating and aliens and John Lilly psychedelic. That's
Yeah.
pretty much all I ever want to talk about. So
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking to us.
yeah,
I learned a lot. It was really
It was
amazing to talk
Was
with
it
you.
enlightening?
Yeah. I'm struggling.
actually, you guys want to talk about the Grateful Dead for a while, or should we go?
I think we got to go. Are you a Dead fan?
Yeah, or a Deadhead maybe. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Is
got
this
it.
gonna like
Well, you
label
just asked me what I
us?
like to talk about.
This is
Yeah.
This is,
What do you love about the Dead? Tell us about that.
What do I love about the Dead?
Yeah.
So the dead to me were like this like shamanic group in the sense that we were just talking about with like a sitter, because like there are lots of people like you who are like really intimidated to get into this psychedelic experience. But what the dead offered was a safe space to do this, because everyone was so in tune and doing this also. Like a lot of people who would never imagine doing psychedelics, next thing they know, they're at a Dead show and they're like, they feel the vibe of the crowd and they meet someone cool and they're like, all right, I'm going to do this. And then when things get weird and they can't handle it, that's what you have the band for. And they were offering like a shamanic frequency to take you through it. And when things get hairy, you just listen to Jerry.
I never thought about it like that.
See, I mean, like that, I cannot. So just in full disclosure, Sawtooth and I are not huge Dead fans.
That's fine.
But like I
No
could,
judgment.
I could see that, like what you just described
Yeah.
as like a thing.
Yeah.
But like,
They've turned so many people on, they've offered that space.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that would be a good safe space for you, though.
No.
Sawtooth,
The whole crowd thing.
yeah,
was
the
intense.
crowd thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't like crowds when you're not on drugs.
Well, you could just pop a show on at home in the comfort of your own home. Jerry will take good care of you.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Just
All right.
one time.
Oh, are you gonna tell the story?
One time I took way too many edibles, and I decided I was going to listen to George Winston's December.
Oh, you've never told me this.
I haven't told you this story.
I don't think so.
Are you familiar with George Winston, Stephen?
No, I was literally just about to look it up.
He's a rural folk pianist. So I put on that. I decided that would be good to listen to. I just remember kind of floating off, and the music it's like really piano heavy, and it's dark and it's somber. And I remember at some point just sitting up in an absolute existential terror. It's like, what am I listening to? Why am I listening to this? Oh my God, what's happening to me?
Oh my God.
Full blown panic, and I'm like smashing the buttons trying to turn it off because it terrified me.
Oh my God.
It was like
You've
that.
never told me this story.
That tinkling winter piano. Ding, 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 ding.
I know exactly.
It was like
what
the
song
Carol
that
of
you
the
were
Bells.
listening to.
It's like, ah! Anyways, all right. Oh, Stephen,
Oh boy.
thank you.
Yo, I'm so
Too
glad you
fun.
reached out to me, man. This is great. Like,
Yeah.
I'm happy to know y'all.
Yeah, likewise. And I will absolutely see you again at the Float Center. I will be there.
Great.
Listeners, we have couple of things we want to just say to you real quick as we're wrapping up. Thank you for continuing to listen. We really appreciate it. There's some things you can do if you want to help us out. Go check out our website,
Our website is live.
It's live, softservepodcast.com. If you are feeling generous and you want to donate anything towards our operational costs, we have a donate button. You can do that.
Leave us a review.
Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts.
That costs $0.
It costs $0. Give us a 5-star review. Write a few nice words about us. That would be good. I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Subscribe to the podcast.
Yep. Share it
download.
with friends.
Tell a friend about it. That's helpful too. I had a listener reach out to me just earlier this week to tell me Spotify did their end of year statistics thing, and our podcast came up as their number 1 most listened to podcast.
What? Shut up.
For them, for that person.
Oh, for that person.
Yeah, they're a super fan. Yeah, that's Rachel. So Rachel, thanks for sharing that with us, and Rachel. Big shout out to you. So thanks.
That's funny.
Everyone else, we love you. We really do.
We do.
We do this.
Wait, let me say something. So when I met you and you reached out, I'm a podcast junkie. I'm like, I'm going to listen to their podcast, obviously. I would say, okay, it's great, but especially if you live in the Valley, there's not many local podcasts, and just the fact that you guys are talking to local people. Who are some of the ones? Can we have the shout out to that woman in Amherst who was doing that cool stuff there?
Hannah.
Now I can't say her last name. From the mill.
I was just very interested in that. The one with the murals in Springfield.
Oh yes,
Brit Rue.
Cool. I really, my buddy Michelle Lyman. I really enjoyed the local one. So if you're local and you like that kind of local podcast vibe, I would check out the local ones.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right, everybody. Stephen, we just like to, when we sign off, just give our listeners a bye now. That's what we do. So if you want to give us your best floaty bye now, that would be good.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Bye now.
Stomping Jen.
Bye now.
All right, everybody. Bye now.
Oh my God.
This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road.